I've been told your topic of the week is problem solving.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I'm very excited because we've been looking at it from the parent point of view, but I'm excited to hear from you about how do we teach problem solving to our kids.
Right. So basically, we kind of start by looking at the age of the child. The younger the child, the simpler the technique that we're going to be dealing with. So normally the kind of problems they're dealing with is another child taking their toy away or not getting access to something they want. So for that kind of skill, which kids start using sentences around 2 years of age. They're able to request for help around that time. We'll start by teaching them those kinds of things.
Okay.
And we'll set up situations, like contrive different situations, and prompt them through it and get them to do the correct response. And then once they start to have real problems in real life, we'll do it in those situations as well.
Okay. Okay, but important to start very early.
Yeah.
Okay, to prime the pump, so to speak.
The point of this is that a lot of young children are tantruming and doing those kind of things. So if we can get in there before the tantrum starts and teach the child to ask for help. So at a very young age, what we're mainly focusing on is teaching them to ask for help when they're in problem situations.
Okay, great thing to know.
It's not necessarily that they're even able to identify that there is a problem or call it a problem or engage in certain behaviors to figure out what the solution is or anything like that. It's just giving them some sort of empowerment when they're in that problem situation.
Okay, and really, we're even before it happens, what we're doing is replacing a behavior that could happen later on, which would be tantruming. So we're prompting them to in some way request for help.
Exactly.
Okay, great. And that could be vocal, or they could request it by sign or pointing to an icon, but asking for help.
Holding up something,
Right.
Yeah, anything.
Okay, great. And then as it progresses and they get a little bit older, it gets a little more complex.
Right. So at about 3 years of age, 3 to 5, children start to actually tell their parent when there's a problem.
Okay.
So they'll go to their parent and say there's a problem.
Now this is for neurotypical children we're
Yes.
talking about, that's when that starts to emerge.
Yeah.
So how do we begin to teach a child on the spectrum who isn't doing that automatically to do that?
Well, basically what we are going to be doing is setting up, again, lots of situations.
Okay.
And then role playing and things like that. So asking the child leading questions, things like, is there a problem? Or what's happening? Or what's wrong? Or something like that. And then teaching them to identify what it actually is. And then, of course, there's different kinds of problems as well. There's more like non-social problems, which would be something like maybe they can't reach an item they want, or something can't be opened, or something broke, or something like that. But then, of course, there's also social problems, like they're in a conflict with another person. And those are two totally different things.
And we want to teach them separately?
They both need to be taught. Yeah, and once you're working on social problem solving, you have to actually teach the child to take the perspective of the other person. So, it gets pretty complicated.
Okay, so a little bit more advanced skill.
Yeah, but there's basic steps for teaching these things.
Okay.
The first thing is helping the child to identify when there is a problem.
Okay.
And to be able to define it and figure out what it is.
Okay.
And then the next step, also there's a visual, if you could go ahead and put it up, that kind of shows all these steps. And this is something you can use when you're teaching the child. It's always nice to have visuals to show them step by step how we go about solving a problem.
And we've got a visual up right now.
Right.
Is this the right visual that you want? Okay, great.
Yeah, so remember too that it's not until about 6 years of age of typical development that children start to solve problems on their own.
Okay, so we don't have the expectation that they're going to be able to do all of this at 3, but we're helping them to do we're filling in some of the steps for them?
Yeah, so from about 3 to 5, they're going to their parents to say there's an issue.
Okay.
And their parents usually walk them through it and help them solve the problem.
Okay.
So they can begin using these visuals that I was just showing you and walk them through the steps. The child's not doing it 100% independently yet. Like I said, around 6 years of age is when they actually have a problem and they'll come up with solutions and start to solve it on their own without involving a parent.
Emily, can we go briefly back to the visual, just because even when you were showing this to me this morning, I was noticing that sometimes I don't participate in all these steps. So we first we have a problem, we're asking for solutions, and then we take a look to see whether we have a good outcome or a bad outcome, and we arrive at, did it work? And sometimes I forget that step. as an adult. So what a great thing for all of us to learn and come up with different solutions and then check, did we implement and say, did it work?
Yeah, so
right.
When they're younger, we're literally just taking them through these steps, but we're teaching them and saying, here's how you do this.
Yes.
So then someday when they have a problem on their own, they'll remember these steps, and they can always use that visual if they needed to get through it.
Great. And so often, we'll hear people say, teenagers, how do I teach my teenager? And we can start to do this at whatever point, but how great if you started this at 2 or 3.
Yeah. And even just thinking about when you're solving the problem of a few different options of the solutions, and really considering the pros and the cons of each of those options, and then choosing which one you think is going to have the best outcome for you. Because that's a whole strategy right there that's really important to use later in life.
Absolutely.
And then picking what seems to be the best option and implementing it. And like you said, checking in and seeing if it worked or not. If it didn't work, what can I do instead? So that's a whole nother issue, which is if the problem is still there and it's not solved, then we kind of have to go back to the beginning of the diagram and think of more solutions, and we have to continue to persevere until we solve the problem. So we're now going to be using our flexibility because we're generating alternative solutions and things like that.
And we all need to be doing that, all of us. Okay, now you also have some great strategies that you can talk to us about.
Right, so there's another visual. This is actually just one of the pages. There's a few pages of these visuals that we have available. This is all in the skills curriculum. And basically the idea here is now we're talking about social problem solving. Okay, and when we're in a social conflict, there's a whole lot more things to think about. So we have these banks. This is one page of our bank that gives them possible ideas. So for example, the you go, I go solution would be like if they're not agreeing about what to do together when they're playing. So in terms of like sharing or something like that. So you go, have a turn, then I'll have a turn. So that's one possible solution. Another would be if we don't agree on what to do, can we come up with a third alternative? That's the one that says third choice, that we both agree on that we would like to do. Or if there's a bunch of kids involved in this whole thing, well, majority could possibly rule. That's another option. We could ask for help. That's an option in our bank. First, second just means, let's say we both want to do ball play, but I feel like playing catch and you feel like playing more like soccer. Let's do your thing first and then we'll do my thing. I give, you give is just compromising. So everyone kind of gives in a little or something like that. Persuasion is a whole nother thing we can teach, and that's a whole nother area in the skills curriculum within our cooperation and negotiation lesson. But we begin to teach them ways of kind of talking people into things. And then distract, that's another option. This is something they can use with like a really young baby, toddler, sibling or something like that. Because oftentimes when they're that young, they'll forget there even is a problem.
Right. You
so anyway, these are only about 8 of the many, many items that we have as options, but we'll teach them these strategies, and then they can use these visual banks to refer to these when they're kind of thinking of different solutions.
And what a lovely thing. And as a parent, you can start out using this visual bank to say, okay, what do I want to teach right now? What different options do I want to teach? Because sometimes in the heat of the moment, you're overwhelmed and your brain shorts out.
Oh, yeah.
And so to have this visual representation to say, okay, here are what some of our options are. It's by no means exhaustive, but a place to start.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely incredible.
And the last thing I always want to make sure is, and every week when I come in, if we're going to talk about teaching a new skill, you're going to hear me say this every single week, but I think it's the most important take-home point when you're teaching anything, is you don't consider the child to have learned the skill or have mastered the skill until you've taught many, many, many different examples of whatever it is you're teaching. And now when a new example comes into their life, they just can do it on their own without being taught. So they don't really have the skill until they're generalizing, and that's what we call generalization. So for all of these things, we'll have to continue to contrive different situations, have real life problems, and kind of step back a little and fade yourself out and see if the child can do it or not. And if they can't, then get back in there and just continue to represent example after example until they can, any new example that they're presented with, they can go through this, and then you know they got the skill.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Really spectacular. And they can find these visual banks in skills.
Yes. It's in the problem solving. Well, actually, we have 3 problem solving lessons.
Okay.
So it's in those lessons.